All right, so the reason for this video is because I had another video out that was called They Didn't Listen, TLP Dead on Arrival, and it was referring to the Fangbreaker TLP before it came out. And I got a comment on that video randomly in the last few days that said, well, this didn't age well. So I'm thinking naturally, maybe I was wrong about Fangbreaker and that maybe it has some type of population explosion or something. Something changed in the game. They didn't reply, and I asked them what they meant by that, or why they didn't think it aged well. Turns out it was just someone that had their own definition of what a dead server is. As we all know, Fangbreaker launched as expected with less than 1/3 of the peak population of Teek. And checking in today, it still ranks behind Teek, being that it's the only newer option to play classic EverQuest in the Luckland expansion besides private servers. It maintains a, I guess, decent population, but my video title of it being dead is true to me, and true in the sense of what we were talking about at the time and the context surrounding it, that any server that launches with that classic rule set is going to attract this type of population and not be explosive like Teek, Mischief, or giving people what they want. And I went back in and I tracked data again on some of the main servers, and we're going to go over the best places to play for the second half of 2025 for EverQuest. I'm really just disappointed. A lot of people had left THJ, or at least the THJ population is down after the lawsuit. It doesn't look like anybody went back to playing EverQuest on emulation or on live, so those people have just disappeared into the abyss, playing other games or doing whatever they do. Maybe they finally retired. But it's pretty safe to say that Daybreak did not get back any of the THJ players that had left THJ or maybe got bored with THJ, that those players have gone somewhere else. And it's just, since the time I've been tracking EverQuest data on both live and emulation servers, this is probably like the lowest point I've ever seen EverQuest. It really is turning into these small niche communities, and there's just not this like attraction to come back to the game anymore, it seems. I think THJ might have been the last hoorah, and places like Project Quarm and such they're like sanctuary servers for the last remaining EverQuest players to continue this game. And I watched that happen with games like Warcraft 2, where they had these private servers and just really small knit communities just to keep the game alive. And it's kind of sad. I don't know if it could have been prevented. I don't know if THJ, if they would have like just worked an agreement out with that, or if they work an agreement out with that, if that's going to bring people back to EverQuest. It feels like you would think a company like Daybreak would eventually just give up the EverQuest and kind of let it go off into the abyss, and maybe that will allow emulation to kind of go unchecked again. But yeah, if your server is not listed in this list, it's because it's a lower population server. That doesn't mean the server's dead or you shouldn't play there. In fact, if you're watching this and your server is not on this list, I would appreciate if you leave a comment saying like what time you play, what server you're on, and like what the guild is like, because there are little carve outs on each server, no matter how small they are, unless it's like one of the really dead ones, where it's worth joining and playing and getting into that community and doing like the raids. Maybe some servers have one raid guild on there that plays a certain time. So all the snapshots of data that I took for the server population was done at peak or optimal play times, meaning like East Coast, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., up to 9 or 10 p.m. before people go to bed, and on the weekends. So there should be some peak snapshots and then optimal playing time snapshots. That's where the average comes from. And then I've also given a population factor in this, which is that server's basically score in relation to the top server. So not overall with all the dead servers, but of this list, that server's population comparison to the top server currently. And first server we're gonna talk about is P99 Blue. And any of these notes could be wrong. I did look up some of the stuff. I don't plan these servers, most of these servers, I just logged in to check population. But P99 Blue, private server, locked at Alias, the average population was around 308 players. One of the original long-running P99 servers. Some of the notes I have is that it's more casual than P99 Green. Economy saturated, legacy items are common, the raid scene is less cutthroat, and it's seen as a stable home for long-term classic EQ fans. Its population score is 1.8. What that generally means, it is 18% of the population of the top server, but its score on a scale of 1 through 10 is 1.8 for how we're going to reference it in this video. So the next server in the list with a higher population is the Convergence, which is a private server. Expansion is at Valius. Average population is 383. It's a custom progressive emulator server. MQ2 and boxing are allowed. It's been praised for its custom raid designs and gear tweaks. It's a small, tight-knit community. You're free to box or use MQ2 on this server. Its population score is a 2.3. And then another server is PEQ, the Grand Creation, which is also a private emulation server. It's currently on the Dragons of North expansion. Average population around 486. It's one of the oldest emulator servers, and it doubles as the main EQMU testbed. It's fully box friendly. It's widely considered the most complete emulator database. It's extremely stable and reliable, but some describe it as feeling like a practice server rather than a social hub. So it's casual friendly, long lasting, though it's not always the most populated. And its score was a 2.9 out of 10. The next server up is Lazarus, which is a private server, Omen's War era. Average population is about 548. This is a private emulator with sandbox flavors and custom rates, quality life improvements. It's box friendly up to 6 accounts. I got a comment from Reddit. One of the players called it fun and sandboxy with a lot of custom content. And the admin team is respected for constant updates and communication. And it appeals to people who want EverQuest, but with modern twists, not rigid classic rule sets. And its population score was 3.3 out of 10. And then on to Bristlebane live server. So the latest expansion for EverQuest, the average population came in about 594. One of the most populated live servers, standard rule set, boxy allowed. It's one of the true hubs in the modern EverQuest community. Strong guild presence of all levels of content. It's a popular alternative to Fiona V for players who dislike FV's extreme economy. And its population score was 3.5 out of 10. Next up, P99 Green is a private server locked at Velius. Average population 618. This is the classic trilogy emulator. It's officially tolerated by Daybreak. No progress beyond Velius. Special notes from the community: it's a hardcore classic EQ feel, strict anti-boxing rules, population is strong but raid competition fierce, with a few guilds dominating, and some love the challenge, others hate the bat phone culture. Its population score was a 3.7 out of 10. Next up is Fiona Vi, which is the most popular live server that has free trade, which is really popular. Average population 657. It's a roleplay preferred live server. Like I said, free trade economy, large population as far as EverQuest is concerned. Like I said, the economy is very unique. Almost everything is tradable. RP aspect is basically gone, but still very active for grouping and raiding. Population score on Fiona Vi was 3.9 out of 10. So next up we have Fangbreaker, the server that I call dead, which I still think is relatively dead and has more of a population than the live servers. What we meant by dead, and it was pretty clear in the context of the video, is that it's not a popular rule set that people rush to play like a Teek or a Mischief. So it has population as expected, and this is the one that had the Luckland era launch, was capped at 50. I think it's capped at 51 now. Average population is 852. It unlocks a slower pace, but being released in Luckland, and it features encounter locking, which is a good feature that Oakland had that I thought they should put in all versions. It reduces kill stealing, but it does remove the open world competition. Some people hate it, some people love it, and it's also viewed as a more alt-friendly server thanks to legacy perks. We'll keep an eye on Fangbreaker, but as I said, the newest TLP, and it's not even the top TLP. So the Fangbreaker population score is a 5.1 out of 10. And then the top 3 servers, which a lot of people are familiar with. Number 3, Project Quarm, which is a private server, which is one that just reached that agreement with Daybreak to stay open. They did lose some custom content. I've heard from people that they didn't really have a lot of custom content, but they're capped at 1,200 players. Their average population is 912. So they're really praised for transparency, developer openness, a lot of mixed feelings with the legal agreement, and then losing the custom content. Player count fluctuates, obviously, and then it's also known for having one of the friendliest EQ emulator communities, and its population score is a 5.4 out of 10. Crazy, right? Third best server to play on population-wise, and scores only a 5.4 out of 10. Next up at number 2, Teek is an EverQuest official TLP. I believe it's in Depths of Ark Hollow. It is still beating out the brand new Fangbreaker TLP, which is what people were saying before it launched and about Fangbreaker being dead, is that it's not even competing with like last year's TLP. Like you would expect, one to die off, never take over. But like I said, that random loot, tradable loot rule set in Teek is just very strong. Now, Teek has a lot of problems of its own. Population average is about 967. It's true box early on, relaxed later, which could be now. I didn't see when it actually stopped. Usually it stops by like Omen's area. So it was really popular at launch. Teek had set like an actual official record, even launching above Mischief. They actually extend server size. And for those of you that don't know, EverQuest servers generally max out around 5,000. How that limit gets set, I don't know, but they had to do something special to allow more players to log into Teek, and that brought the limit up. I think I tracked its high point was like 6,200 people. So definitely the largest modern time TLP with the highest population recorded. Population dips as expansions go as expected, and the random loot does keep some of the farming fun, but it does create that market inflation, and then you get the chrono farmers, the power levels, everybody coming in for chrono. That's a big problem with the tradable loot servers. It still suffers from some of the unlock schedules where Mischief did, and it was this is actually a larger TLP problem, is that the 8 weeks, 12 weeks, it's too slow for people that play like 4+ hours a day in raid. That's too slow for that. But also at the same time, if you're a casual player only playing 10, 20 hours a week, it's too fast. So it does seem really hard to catch up. And if you do something like take the summers off, you just fall behind. But obviously random loot, tradable loot lets you catch back up. But it's split on whether it's too fast, too slow. And I don't know if that they'll find the right pace ever for that. Its population score is only a 5.7 out of 10. And that leads me to still the most populated, best place to play server, most popular server in EverQuest, which is a private server, the Hero's Journey. Even though it lost some population from the lawsuit, it's currently in the Plains of Power expansion. It can only do bug fixes right now per legal order, no updates. Average population is 1,683 people still, with obviously the population score is 10 because it's the lead server. It's a multi-class server with legendary gear, solo-friendly raid balance, and it is currently being sued by Daybreak. Community feedback is players say it's the EverQuest they always wanted. Small group raids and rewarding gear. Some worry about balance. Multi-class combos can feel broken. Lost Loot has split opinions. Some defend THA's creativity, others think it crossed the line. And new players often feel overwhelmed by the complexity. It's one of those servers that, kind of like Turtle Wow, like the devs listen and they make changes and they make good custom content. And it is, to me, the best version of EverQuest still, even though it's being sued and maybe taken down. That is one of the things you have to consider when playing on THJ. But however, the server is so fast paced that even if it only were to stay up for 2 more weeks or a week, I think it's worth checking it out and just running through and doing as much stuff as you can in that server. It is definitely a unique take on EverQuest. It's the most fun I've had in EverQuest in a long time. It does give you like this god mode where you can run around and cream stuff. It's really focused on getting to the max level, fast experience, fast AA, and then you kind of end up farming gear. But a lot of the gear is so cheap now, you can buy at least the top 2 or 3 for relatively low cost, and then you'll be able to farm the rest. Running through that once and just clearing plenty of time, I think, and unlocking expansions and doing things that you haven't done before, I think is well worth it, even if you're only going to spend a week in it. But like I said, and I've been saying, don't get too heavily invested if you plan on it going long term, because it is currently being sued. But yeah, that's the state of EverQuest. The top server, and it's not even close, has almost double population of the next live server. The top server is a private server being sued, and there's still more people there after it's being sued. They had even more people than that before. I think the average population is around 2,500 to 3,000 from when I tracked before. So there's a significant amount of players falling away from the server, but that's not necessarily due to the lawsuit. That might be because they're not able to change stuff anymore or add expansions. One of the problems I had with THJ, which is not gonna be a problem for a lot of people, but I picked it up and started playing. It's like you want to test all these different combos and farm stuff and get to the end game and try stuff out, but then it's like you can only really farm best in slot gear on a few characters unless you play all day before they were releasing another expansion. The expansions they came out way too fast for me. And I do think that they were excited to get ahead and like really hammer out these expansions and balance issues that in the future, they could have made a progression server with a longer unlock period. You cannot just progress through and unlock the content yourself. Like you have to actually wait. And people say, and people are always saying like, well, you can progress your own pace. But yeah, that's true. But you feel the pressure of being on a multiplayer server and seeing people advertising like these cool like AUGs or cool gear, and you're just chilling back in Vilius and there's this Plains of Power gear, or you can interact with that and buy it from the bazaar. So it doesn't feel like you should be progressing at your own pace when you're playing on a server. And they had things like solo, self-found, and hard mode. I honestly think that if for some reason they survive, like an offline solo player version of this game would do well. It really would. You really don't need to play with anybody else with the way this is set up. It is like a god mode, and I always thought that a solo player version of THJ would be pretty fun to play, and that would really feel like you're going at your own speed, your own time, and not feeling rushed by content updates, balances, and the patches, or you know, people advertising items and cool stuff that you want to try. And I think that would really do well in exploring your own pace. But so as I said, if your server was not in this list, doesn't mean that you shouldn't play there. And I would appreciate if you leave comments saying where you play, what time you play, and about how many people, you know, are in your guild or whatever your group. And because you got excluded mainly because your population is so low on average, and you've been excluded from my list because of that, because I view it as more players, more casual friendly, more easier to get in instead of having just the one guild, and maybe that one guild doesn't like you and you can't get in or whatnot. But yeah, that's the state of EverQuest right now. So, you know, it is what it is. You know, the original predictions that we made with Fangbreaker is dead. It's not dead, but it's dead, if that makes sense. It's not the server that would have done well and kept a lot of the population there. They could have made advancements on a Teek Mischief thing and attracted more population back to the game, and they didn't. And releasing the same type of server with a few caveats, you know, a few different little things, it just doesn't really work. You have a good population as far as EverQuest servers are concerned. You don't have the booming population of where Teek or Mischief was at this point in the game, not even close. And you released at less than a third of the prior TLPs. So it is what it is. And you know, the status and the state of EverQuest as a whole, and the whole population being down across the board, is the result of that type of stuff. You know, it's the result of not listening to your fan base and releasing servers players want. Obviously, you know, people do want those classic type TLPs, and you got the 900 players, but what about the other players that don't want to play in that type of server? And there are a lot more players that don't want to play in that type of server that aren't playing right now. You know, they're still on Teek. They probably left to go other games because there wasn't something like Teek Plus released, you know, or Mischief Plus released. So you lost those players. You sued the Hero's Journey, so they were not able to advance their content. You lost those players. They're gone. The population is nowhere to be found in any of the live or emulation servers. It's gone. You know, from a year ago, it's gone. And I don't know how you get those people back. And you know, it's a game I grew up with. Most of you watching grew up with. It's a game we love, and it's on its last leg, you know. So play it while you can, because as we all know, Daybreak is a for-profit company, and once this hits where it's not going to be profitable anymore, all we're going to have left, maybe, is emulation servers. They might shut down EverQuest and shut down emulation. You know, they still own the game, so they're still a profitable company. And EverQuest 1 and 2 only makes up like 5 to 10% of their profit. So even if they shut down EverQuest 1, they are still going to have money and lawyers to protect EverQuest IP in case they ever want to make an EverQuest 3 or whatever they want to do with it. But thanks for watching. And if you're interested in watching any more of my content, check out one of these 2 videos.